Well, here we go. I'm going to call us to order. It's 5:02 p.m. and I think we've got everybody. So welcome everybody to our first virtual Board of Trustees meeting. Thank you to all the trustees for being here, to the staff, to all the guests who are joining us, to anybody who's tuning in. We really appreciate it. So we'll start with the roll call. Trustee Andrews.
Here.
Trustee Capel.
Here.
Trustee Clark, I'm here. Trustee Khan.
Here.
And Trustee McMullins. Make sure you unmute yourself.
Here.
Perfect. Even though I can see you and you are obviously there. So
Okay.
I just, want to request in advance everybody's patience as we figure out our Brown Act compliant virtual meeting processes. Kylan tells me that there are no public comments that have come in ahead of time. However, there may be some that come in as we progress. So certainly we will remain aware for those. And then for each of our votes today, for any of our discussion, I'm going to go through a little bit more elaborate process than we normally do, just to make sure we're not missing anybody's comment or nobody's talking over each other. So we'll do sort of a roll call process every time. So with that being said, let's just get right into it. So we'll first approve the agenda. So I'll call first for any changes to the agenda as listed in the board packet. Is also displayed on this screen. All right, hearing none, then I'm going to ask for a motion to adopt the agenda as it appears in the packet.
I'll move that we adopt the agenda.
I'll second it.
Okay, perfect. So a motion from Terry and a second from Gwen. So I'm going to ask for a roll call vote on that. Trustee Andrews?
Aye.
Trustee Capel?
Aye.
I vote aye. Trustee Khan?
Aye.
And Trustee McMullins?
Aye.
Perfect. So the agenda is approved. So we'll move on to public comment on non-agenda items. And although nothing came in ahead of time, Kylan, I believe you said you had something you wanted to say at this point. So I'd like to recognize you, please.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to let you guys know that I have submitted my resignation to Nikki. My last day with the library will be Friday, May 8th. And I just wanted to thank you all for everything. I've been at the library for a long time, it feels like now. And, we've been through a lot, but I think we're on a really good path now with Nikki and the board that we have. So yeah, that's just what I wanted to say and let you guys know. And yeah, thank you.
Well, Kylan, thank you so much for everything that you've done. I know that personally, I have always just been so grateful for all of your expertise and your wonderful, generous spirit and your helpfulness. And I am very sad, of course, that we'll be losing you, but I know you will be a tremendous asset to whatever organization is lucky enough to have you. So I wish you all the best for you and your family, and just thank you so much for everything you've done.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think any of us would have survived the transition the last couple of years without you, and especially your historical knowledge. So a whole lot of thanks from us, Kylan.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Thank you for everything.
Hey, Kylan, this is Terry. I concur with everything that they've said, and you're really a pro at this. I want you to know that I've always respected your ability to move things along and know all of the little esoteric rules regarding how we interact with the county and so on. So you've been really the backbone of the group as far as I'm concerned, and I really appreciate your time and your effort, and I wish you all the best in whatever you're doing next.
Can I just chime in and say the same? And especially, Colleen, I just want to say when I first came on the board and then so fast ended up running the meetings. It was just such a comfort to be able to like look out of the corner of my eye over you at that table and make sure that I was on the right track. And I just feel like you've been a backstop for everything we've done. And I just wish you the very, very best. I think pro is the right word. So very, very much good luck to you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Here, here.
I would think that, I'd just say that you've gone above and beyond the call of duty all of the time when we have asked you for things, that you've always been there for us. And thank you so very much for all that you've done for the library over the past years. It's been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gwen.
All right. So at this time, presuming that there are no additional public comments on non-agenda items, and again, if we have public comments that come in at other points in the meeting, we will certainly entertain them. And I think, unless there's any objection from the board, that my inclination is to be as relaxed as possible about letting people participate should they wish to. So we'll proceed through, but if anybody joins later and has a comment, we can always include that as it comes. So that brings us to special presentations. At this point, I'm going to turn it over for the presentation of our annual financial report for fiscal year 18-19 and our auditor's report.
Good afternoon, everybody. How are you doing?
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
I'm here today to talk to you about the financial statements for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2019. If I could share my screen. Is that okay, Kylan?
I have given you permission to, so if you click share, it should pop over to you.
All right. Oh, you cannot share while the other participating is sharing.
I will stop. I'm sorry. Try now.
Got it. Okay, I have the yoke, I have control here. So I have the financial statements. Everybody can see that on the screen?
Yes.
All right, so I'm going to move down through the financial statements here to the opinion paragraph. It is in our opinion out here at the bottom, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of the governmental activities and the general fund of the Altadena Library District as of June 30th, 2019, and respective changes in financial position for the fiscal year then ended in according with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. We believe that is a unmodified opinion, a clean opinion for the financial statements. So as I move through here, I want to talk about the aspects of the comparability between the 2 years and the changes which occurred between those 2 years. So if we look overall from the program revenues here on page number 7, we had overall program revenues $1,045,860 versus $1,027,741, an increase of $18,119 between the 2 periods there. The expenditures, on the other hand, between the 2 periods did increase significantly for the 2 periods. Now, the main aspect of that was, of course, the legal and the settlement aspects. The payment of about $70,000 for the health insurance for the retirees that wasn't reimbursed during that period. $19,000 for the earthquake insurance, and about $80,000 for the trustee election during the period there. So that gave us the increase in the overall expenditures between the 2 periods there. General revenues, this is moreover of your investment earnings, as well as the property tax that was brought in during the year. And we did see that those did increase during the periods there. So if we look down below here, a little more detail in the special assessments, we can see that increased. Charges for services stayed about the same there for the overall services for the organization. And the operating grants and contributions did increase a little bit there, giving us the overall 19,000. In the general revenues overall, property taxes, there's the boost there of $74,000 overall for property taxes, $94,000 overall for investment earnings, good investment earnings at the end of that year, and other revenues overall for 6,000, giving you the change, the increase in overall revenues of about 193,738. But as we go to the next page here, salaries and benefits, we had a credit there overall in salaries and benefits from the application of the health insurance, the health post-employment benefits for overall, the calculation of that. But when we look at materials and services here, there's the 575 made of particularly from 375 from the legal costs and settlement, 70,000 for health insurance for the retirees, 19,000 for earthquake, as well as 80,000 for the trustee election, giving us the main change there overall, and depreciation expense overall, just going forward on a non-cash basis there. So that gets us overall to our basis there of the decrease in the change in net position of a negative 61,066 versus the prior year before a positive 119,341. Any questions there? That's where the most of the change occurred. With that overall, it also had changed. If we look at the current assets, we're going to have a little reduction there in our overall cash position at the end of the year because of the use of the money for all those expenditures. And we did have some bills to pay at the end of the year in our current liabilities. So that's where the main changes occurred between the two periods if you're trying to look at it from an apple to apple point of view. So
this is Jason. Is it possible to change the view to a single page just to make it a little bigger?
I can do that. I can view to,
if that's okay with other folks.
Yes.
Page view, zoom by width.
Okay.
So that's the overall there and the change in that position, why we saw the reduction this year versus in the past years. So we had 200,000, 193,738 in more revenue coming in, predominantly from the investment earnings and property taxes. And then if we look to the expenditures, we had a decrease in overall in salaries and benefits because the application of the health insurance provided to the retirees, and the materials and services. This is the big jump, the 575,281. So we brought in 200,000, but we basically had 375 going out, so giving us the negative overall. Questions from that?
Well, why don't you maybe go ahead through everything that you've got, and then at the end we can do questions all at once, if that's okay.
Okay. So that's the way we would look at it from a comparative aspect. If we're going to look at it from a cash aspect, I'm going to go back here into the cash statement. Okay. So this right here predominantly is more on a cash basis. So what we brought in property tax money, what we brought in from the redevelopment increment that came in, the special assessment, the library tax, charges for services during the period, operating grants and other contributions that were received during the year, investment earnings overall, and other revenues, and then salaries and benefits expenditures, materials and services 1.6, when that is usually about $1 million that we usually see in materials and services, that number. So capital outlay, what we spent on fixed assets, giving us a net change in fund balance of a negative 48,813 overall. So giving you kind of on a cash basis where the spending was in the different categories. I can go further into certain footnotes if you wanted to, but pretty much when you're looking at it this way, we're looking at it more on, you know, on an apple to apple basis, what changed between the two fiscal periods. And of course, you know, the biggest changes there were, of course, the legal settlement, health insurance for retirees, the earthquake insurance purchased this year, and the trustee election, which were the big ticket items that were the big changes during the year that weren't there in the prior year. So.
Okay. Let's pause here for a minute and open up the floor to questions from trustees. Betsy.
I just have a practical question, Paul. I'm reading it from a hard copy, and so far I've been able to keep up with where you are. But would you just always name the page number you're going to?
Sure.
So I'll be able to find you. Thank you.
Yeah, right now we're at the bottom, page 14.
14, got it.
Say, Paul, this is Terry.
Yes,
And
sir.
I wonder if you could just take us through that, the mechanics of the net position calculation again. Charts that I've done show sort of a drop in our net position over the last several years, with one exception, and that was when we had that big grant that came in. And my understanding is that the general health or the direction your entity is going is sort of reflected by that net position. And what I'm hearing you say is that the change downward is really due to this one-time event of having to pay, much higher legal fees and the settlement and so on. Could you kind of take us through that a little bit about the practicality of that metric as a guideline for us?
Yeah, I mean, you want to be able to add to your reserves each year. And this is the page right here where you would see that adding to those reserves. So the materials and services, this line item right here, if you go back in prior years, this one usually ranges about $1 million, okay? So this year, that number is really ticked up. That ticked up overall in regards to those individual expenditures that we saw that came in that were expended during that period there. So that's adding to your bottom line is where you're really looking at, the ability there to fund your overall infrastructure, things that you need to do around the library. Because this right here, if you're starting to go in the negative, then you're taking away from your reserves. All right. This is the first year in a long time that we've seen it's gone the other way. It's taking away from your reserves. It's not in an aspect of where you're adding to your reserves, which you have been doing for the past years. So.
But according to my calculations, that the amount that we added each year was variable and trending down just a little bit, right?
Yeah. Well, there's two different aspects to that. There's one that's you're going to be in the full accrual net position. This is we're looking at fund balance. So this is really your cash position that you have. This gives you a better matrix of your spending during the year on a cash basis of where you're seeing your reserves overall, this balance down here, versus the full accrual. The full accrual, we'll talk about, the pension liability, we'll talk about a lot of non-cash, where your fixed assets are. That'll take into consideration all of your long-term as well as your short-term liabilities and aspects. This right here gives you more of a, where are we seeing the cash being spent? Where's the cash going out? And where are our reserves sitting that we need to, if we need to do certain things, certain improvements to the library, or do we need a rainy day fund going forward? This is where you would see that in here. So.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And then sorry, go ahead, Kate. I was going to say just a brief follow-up just for clarification on my end to Terry's point is, so we have what is legally required as far as reserves. I don't know if reserves is the right word, and then we've been able to maintain some additional amount above and beyond that, correct?
Well, this is your reserves right here at the bottom. I mean, you've got at the end of the year, you ended with 3.3 million with the reserves.
Okay.
That's your cash plus. So we take cash up here. Sorry, come up here. Go to the page before. Page 12, I believe, if you're looking at a hard copy, page 11. did I want to go there? No, I want to go down. I want to go to page 12. So here's your 3.2 million in cash and investments. You have some interest that's being paid right at the end of the year. You have some more cash coming in for property taxes and assessments receivable that were received in July or August at the end of the year, and some other accounts receivable and prepaid items that will be expensed. So 3.4 million. You had some bills that you had to pay at the end of the year. So you had 155,740 in bills, accrued expenses, and you had your last payroll that was paid. Your payroll was for the June period, but it was paid out in July. Okay, so the last real expenditure for that fiscal period when the cash was paid out. So you had 183. So you take away the 3.4 million, 3.48 versus the 1.8, it leaves you with 3.3 million, this amount right here, 3.2 overall, 3.299008. That is your reserve at the end of the year that you have available to you in cash to move forward. Okay, we say this, some of this stuff is non-spendable, some of it is assigned. The assignment, of course, is your vacation payable at the end of the year. So.
Paul, Jason, did that answer your question? I didn't want to.
Yeah. Yep.
Let me just sort of ask a bigger picture question, which is, given all of that and given the change that we saw in fiscal year 18-19, one of the things that I think, sort of Terry's question was getting at earlier that we've been trying to work out is, how is our revenue keeping pace with our expenses, right? And granted, the legal settlement, the attorney's fees, all of those are what I would say not regular course of business expenses, whereas things like retirement, earthquake insurance, like those are things that just are going to come up and we need to plan for, and that's just how it goes. Ideally, we don't get sued in the future and don't have to pay out, a bunch to lawyers. So leaving that to one side, right? If we leave the legal settlement, the fees, that line item to one side, what is your assessment of how revenue is keeping up with expenses? Like, had that legal settlement not been there, what do you think we would be looking at in terms of, end of year net position?
Well, this would, of course, become positive, right? That probably would have been positive to the tune of about $300,000. Mm-hmm. Okay. Which we've normally seen that you're adding to your reserves, because so if you kind of look at this, you've got, if this is your total revenues right here, 3.8 million, and we're expecting property taxes to stay here. Redevelopment increment, that's still going to be continually coming in. Your special assessment library tax, until that sunsets, that's still available there. Charges for services, granted, yes, I mean, this year a little bit different because you haven't been open for a while, about a month, right? Right now. Operating grants and contributions, that's still money that comes in from the state library and other grants that are available to you for programs that you provide. This is the big one right here. I mean, making this amount in investment earnings, that's just manna from heaven right there. So the county account did provide, as we saw, interest rates were rising, but interest rates have now come down. So that could be a little bit more of a mixed bag, or half of that you'll make this year. And then other revenues. So when you really look at it, you go, I've got, if this is my revenues that I brought in and this is the reserves I have, you can't even really say that you have a year's worth of revenues in reserve right now.
Right.
Okay. Because you still need half of this just to get through till December, until the first property tax payments are coming in. So you're going to need, half a year's worth of revenue that you're not really earning. You're not getting that big cash infusion until after the December 10th property tax payment.
Right.
So around, we call it the Christmas present and the Easter gift, the May payment. When the two payments come in during the year, that's your biggest amount of your bulk of your cash that comes in during the year. So you need to be able, you're going to be dipping down for the first, for the first part of the year. You have to dip down, and it'd be nice to see if that would be 3.8 million, but you've got 500,000 that you've got to make up there.
Right.
To be able to really look at it. And then with the shutdown and everything like that, you're still making your property tax money, but you're not on the teeter system in LA County. So LA County, you're not on what's considered a teeter system, where the county would forward you your whole property tax and assessment increment for the year. And then as people pay in the background, when they pay, late, the county advances you the funds, then they pick up all the penalties and interest on all those late payments. You're right with the county. So if people don't pay, and there was that April 10th payment here that a lot of people we've heard maybe not made their payments. So cash may be, this revenue may be a little bit lower that's coming in. You're owed it, but I don't know if you've had the cash collections for it. So that's the only problem that we'd see this year right now. So.
Yeah, I guess, my question is sort of what would we expect to see in a normal year, right? Non-shutdown year. What did we see given irregularities? It's year 18.
Yeah, your property tax increment, the 2.5 million right there, you pretty much could bank that plus 3%.
Yeah.
Okay. Each year. I mean, just hands down for being LA County. If it was a normal year, you would at least see a 3% increase in that, okay? Just for turnover of properties and things, reassessments and stuff, and the value of the properties going up in your area. You would see that. Other than that, hopefully you would stay straight with your special assessment, the investment earnings. Hopefully that keeps up during the year as you have more cash, and not having to pay out as much, so.
Okay. So ideally then, as we think ahead, and this is kind of jumping a little bit ahead of this audit, which I understand, but as we're sort of thinking ahead to our budget for this coming year and thinking about closing out fiscal year 1920, we would want to see a reserves balance that looks like at least a year's worth of operating expenses.
A year's worth of operating revenue. You would like to see at least 1 year of revenue.
Right.
That's where that's your goal, is what you're going to try to get to, and stuff is.
Right. Okay. So we're about $500,000 shy of that as of right now.
As of right now, yeah.
Well, as of this report, who knows? I don't know. I would have to look at Nicole's numbers, but okay. Perfect. Thank you. Other questions, comments?
Most of the operation grants and contributions came from, was that Friends and also?
Friends and the state library.
And the state library. So that means that we probably need to write more grants, try to get some encouraged in that, some more revenue in that area.
I mean, there's only so much grants is out there.
Yeah, that's true too.
For the programs, and you have to be able to provide the programs. And during a shutdown now, it's kind of hard to be able to provide those programs because it's more of outreach and stuff that you're providing them. So.
Right.
So Paul, this is Terry. A good way to characterize this is that we're living paycheck to paycheck right now, with enough in our account that if we run into a rainy day situation, that we've got some drawdown power there. But things really aren't expanding for us revenue-wise all that much, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is what you get in your property tax money and stuff like that. I mean, your only really attempt to gain more ground in regards to revenue is, of course, the special assessment line item, and make sure that doesn't sunset, that keeps going, so.
Well, and we're at 84% of reserves, right? So we're not broke.
No.
We're not, we don't have a full year in reserve, which I understand would be ideal, but we're not, we're not in danger.
The ship is continuing as usual and stuff like that. But if there's things that you want to do more, improvements, other aspects, there's debt and there's pulling down your reserves to pay for that. So
But we can only pull down our reserves to a certain extent, right? What's the legal, is it 6 months that we have to keep, is the legal standard for that? You know?
at a minimum, because remember, you need 6 months of revenue to get you from July 1st till the end of December, when that first incursion of property tax money comes in after the December 10th payment. So.
Yeah, I think, for me, and maybe I'm speaking for others, there's this sort of a unicorn of a fund out there, and that's our reserves that we have. But we really can't get into those because we might need to dip into it, like in the year that we just had, when we had a little bit more than we thought we spent a little bit more than we thought we were. I don't have any questions, but I do have a couple of comments, as I bet a lot of us do. But I was really happy to see the report by Christopher regarding the grant that we're in competition to get. And I drilled into that website and saw the response that was made and so on. And just really wanted to express my admiration for everybody that was involved with that. I know the whole library staff in a lot of ways. Really good job. And I just wanted to give a shout out to all of you. My other general comment is that as I sat in my house for the last 3 weeks and watching what you've all been doing, especially on the reports here, you've just done a great job of engaging, even in this desultory time when it seems like nobody's doing anything. So my hat's off to all of you for being very productive in your positions, and I just wanted to make that comment. You still there?
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Other questions, comments?
I'd just like to add a few comments. I just want to say to Christopher, I especially love the part about us being the undisputed champion. That made me feel great, and it should make you all feel great. I did have a question about Christopher's report. Maybe I should remember, but I don't remember what the mobile library project is. Maybe somebody could read.
I'll jump in. This is Chloe. So Christopher, I think, put that in there because I think he was putting the grant under his sort of department, but it's something that he and I and Jonathan are working on. The idea is to have a vehicle that could work both as an outreach tool as well as a something that our facilities staff could use to go between the branch and, sorry, I'm like a little shaky still from all of that. So the idea, we were able to submit the grant, and it would be, there's a leveled response of winners of what you could win. So the range is from 10,000 as the lowest all the way up to, I think it's 100,000, and it's through an organization called LA 2050. And so that was the grant that we were able to submit. And I believe down the line right now, they're going through and choosing who would proceed to the finalists. And if it's the finalists, then we would have to get the community to rally around and help vote for us. And it would proceed, I think in June is when it hits the peak of when we would need to start that campaign. So hopefully that answers that.
Fantastic. Thank you. That sounds amazing. I just have a couple other things I wanted to ask about. I was curious, and this would be a children's department question. I just wanted to know a little bit more about panels to pages. I don't remember hearing about that. I guess I'm sure it has something to do with graphic novels and comic books, but I just wondered what it was exactly.
Yeah, this is Mei-Ling. Panels to Pages is actually a grant that Amanda received. I guess she applied for it last year. It's the Ezra Jack Keats Panel to Pages grant, and it's a program to bring graphic novel programming and teach kids about graphic novels. And then at the end, they create their own and bring that to children. So they're bringing in, or brought in different speakers and did different lessons as well.
Cool. That sounds great. It was just a kick for me personally to see among the different things you guys are doing at home are some of the same things I'm doing at home. Like I went to the middle grade magic seminar too, and you know, it's kind of fun to have a little closer feeling about you guys as my colleagues, as well as Altadena Library peeps. I just have one tiny thing to finish up, and that's just a little thing at the bottom of page 4. I just think there's a name missing, just to correct the minutes. Of course, the correspondence section at the bottom, I don't know if there was another person after Trustee Clark. I don't remember myself what happened there.
Thank you. That's it. So this is, yeah, page 4 of the board package.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like it may also be that we just got that cut off because of the page numbers.
It's not on the next page, so.
Right. No, I'm wondering if it's like underneath where the page number is. Yeah, you're exactly right. It looks like there's a name that was left off.
Kylan, can you look into that for us?
I just read that as Trustee Clark, trustee.
Yeah.
Which page is that?
This is page 4. It's
Page
the minutes from February.
Okay, let me take a look.
I mean, I'm thinking she's gonna probably have to go back and listen to the video, so I'm sure we can get that corrected.
Okay. Well, what we can do, and we'll continue on with comments and questions, but what we can do is when we vote to approve the consent calendar, we can do it with the amendment that whatever is missing on page 4 be corrected.
Okay.
Other comments, questions? Jason, anything from you? Okay. Gwen?
No, not right now.
I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just like to echo what everybody else said, which is that it has been such a pleasure to see all the creative and really interesting and thoughtful programming that's been happening. And also certainly my thanks to the staff and to the supervisors and all of the teams who have been figuring out how to make everything work in some very challenging and unusual circumstances. I really appreciate everybody's resilience and creativity, and I know it's been a really hard couple of months, and I think it will continue to be challenging, and I am just very, very grateful for the team that we have, and I know that the community is as well, because consistently I hear just nothing but positive feedback for the creativity and the resilience of our team. So thank you all so much. So at this point, I'd like to go ahead and take a vote to approve the consent calendar with the amendment on page 4 to be made as needed. So I'll take a roll call vote on that. Having been moved and seconded, Trustee Andrews? Oh, you're muted. You're muted, Terry.
Sorry about that. I vote yes.
Okay, perfect. Trustee Capel?
Yes.
Trustee Khan?
Aye.
McMullins?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, and that's a vote for me. So that's a unanimous vote to approve the consent calendar. There being no items removed from the consent calendar at this time, we'll proceed to our reports. So we'll start with our report from the Altadena Library Foundation. If I recall correctly, I saw Bridget on the line. Bridget, we have the foundation's written report, but would you like to go ahead and give us your report in person?
No, you are perfectly able to read what I wrote. I don't need, I just want to know what's going on with our board. Thank you for offering me that, though, Katie.
Okay, so thank you. Thank you so much. I think unless there's a request, given that it's in the board package, I think we won't read into the record the full reports from the foundation or from the Friends unless there's a request that we do that from any of the trustees. Okay. So that being said, I'd like to just, as always, extend our thanks to the foundation and to the Friends for continuing to support the library and for keeping us posted. And obviously a lot of adjustments have had to be made. And, you know, I think we're all sad that the May book sale won't be happening, but certainly I'm sure we'll reunite on the other side. And the book sale will be truly epic as everybody goes through their house and realizes how much stuff is in their house now that we have to spend all of our time here.
It'll just be that much bigger when it happens.
It's gonna be that much, yeah. Exactly right. So I did want to flag the Friends planning to hold a virtual event in May. We'll obviously look forward to more details on that. They've floated the idea of doing something like their book pitch party, but just virtually. And I know that that was a lot of fun in November. So we will look forward to more details as those come out. So with that, I think I'd like to proceed to 7B, the district director's report. So Nikki, I'll hand it over to you.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I did want to say, as I read through my report again, it's a weird one. And I know it's because it's covered so much time and so much has happened since the beginning of basically February, which is when I started writing the report that was going to be in the March meeting. So I do want to start out, as I kind of said at the beginning of my report, by saying a big thanks from the staff. Pretty much every time I meet with them, they do want to express their gratitude to the board for continuing to support them, you know, financially as well as emotionally. And then I also want to take this opportunity to thank the staff. They've been engaged and inspired and innovative, and honestly, like I'm so proud to be their director right now. So I'm just kind of going through my report a little bit. Chloe will talk during her communications update on Altadena Connection, so I won't really go much into that, except to say that it's one of the, I think, positive things that's really coming out of this whole situation. You know, I know there's been a lot of talk of centralizing our communication and like having the library kind of take the lead on being this information hub. And, you know, within 3 days of the closure, we really started down that path. So I am grateful that this has given us the opportunity to get that moving forward. Our last update was this past Friday. And again, I'll let Chloe speak to that when she gives her report. As far as the human resources study, our consultant with Coffin Associates does most of his work remotely. So interestingly, I don't really feel like that has been affected by us being closed. As I outlined in my report, we went through the product position description questionnaires with the staff. They then were interviewed literally in the nick of time. Staff were interviewed on March 10th. We closed the 13th, as you know. So thankfully those took place. From there, they sent Nicole, our business manager, and I recommendations in terms of any reclassification, any position changes or title changes. And then her and I have had several meetings with them to the point of today where I actually was able to send out the draft classification descriptions to each individual staff member with the recommendation for either them to stay in their same position with no title change, a suggestion for title change, or even reclassification. So staff were sent, I emailed those individually to everybody today, and they have until May 8th to respond to Nicole, as well as reach out to Coffin Associates with any questions they may have. But overall, I mean, I'm just really impressed with how this whole thing has moved forward. They've been an excellent, I wasn't really around when they were chosen, but you guys did a great job because they've been a dream to work with. Right now, we're in the compensation study part of things, where they're taking those classifications that we identified as keeping and comparing to the 10 to 12 other systems. And Nicole and I are really crossing our fingers that they're going to get back to us pretty quickly, because we would really like to see what the financial implication would be next year, so that we can hopefully build that into this year's budget moving forward, at least in some type of informed way. So more information to come on that. So one of the things that we're having staff do since they're home is requiring them to watch the equity, diversity, and inclusion webinars that we've been sending out that have, it's a series being offered by San Jose State's iSchool, which is the library school up there. In addition to that, staff are required to watch 1 to 2 more online training or webinars each week, which they identify. So it's really amazing to see the list of trainings that people have identified. I know a couple of staff, I'm going to forget, you guys have heard of the Science of Wellbeing. I think Yale's the university that offered it. We had several staff enroll in that. But it's giving people really an opportunity to build skills that maybe they wouldn't have time to do otherwise, as well as, you know, let them fill their days. Because I know after about a week and a half, everybody was expressing their boredom for sure. So let's see. I'm also meeting every Monday morning with the management team via Zoom. Today, we actually did our round robin to update on everything that we're working on with our departments and staff. And then at the end, we discussed articles from the Stanford Social Innovation Review. Katie and I talked about adding a resource. I was looking at the Harvard Business Review as well as the Stanford Social. We ended up going with that one. So it's a great resource for the management team and I to be looking at, reading, and discussing as we meet each week. I also had an all-staff meeting on Friday, April 17th, and we had 100% attendance, which I thought was pretty amazing. It was great to connect with everyone. We're gonna meet again on May the 8th, which is a Friday also. I just wanted to plug, even though I know we have the budget committee report-ish, not really a report this time around, but we're gonna have the budget committee meeting to go over the draft budget for fiscal year 2021 next Tuesday, May 5th. We're working with Kylan right now to get the agenda posted, as you know, we're gonna have to have an open meeting for that as well. And I'm really gonna emphasize it to the staff too, because I know there's been a lot of anxiety or uncertainty about what's coming. You know, there's a lot of library systems that are having to reduce hours, reduce staff, furloughs. So I think I'm definitely gonna emphasize it to them this week that they're welcome to attend. And really, if they have any questions or concerns, they can always reach out to me. Lastly, I didn't include in my report, but thanks to Katie connecting me with Katie Poole of the Pasadena Literary Alliance, we're really moving forward on a partnership with them and hoping to have a virtual author talk that's going to be moderated by Les Klinger at some point in May. Chloe and Jesse and Stella have been meeting with not Katie Poole, but some of their board members to get that moving forward. He's an enthusiastic moderator for us, and I think gonna connect us to some really excellent authors. So this has a lot of potential to be not only a great program while we're closed, but ongoing into the future. Basically like open books, virtual givings that we're gonna be credited as the co-sponsor. So it's a really cool opportunity moving forward. More information to come. And I've also been regularly attending meetings with library directors, both through the California State Library and through the Southern California Library Cooperative. I mean, most of the conversation when we meet stems around how we're going to reopen, what that's going to look like, how we're going to keep staff safe and the patrons safe, and sanitizing books and everything you can think of. So every time that opportunity presents itself, I am attending those meetings. Last week, I was able to present to the Altadena Town Council, as well as be the featured speaker for the Altadena Rotary. And then on Saturday, also presented to the Friends of the Library Board. They had their board meeting on Saturday. So just to update everybody on what's going on, and again, create more awareness about both Altadena connections, as well as all of the online offerings that we're sharing with the public. So overall, I just want to say I'm so impressed with all the virtual offerings of the staff and the Altadena community as a whole. Yesterday, we had Poetry and Cookies, which was the passing of the Poets Laureate, and had up to 80 people at one point on that program in our Zoom platform. So it was such a success, and it just shows you that we're not librarying like we used to, but that doesn't mean that we're not doing amazing work. I want to conclude by also thanking Kylan for all of her hard work, her help, her advice, and her guidance. She's going to be very missed. I have a really big learning curve, but it'll be good because I'll hopefully know the ins and outs of her job through this whole process. But I think that's all I had. So I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have.
I just have one. Nikki, I see you're working with the county and with Pasadena about when we can expect to reopen the library. Is there anything at all out there about when public facilities might be reopening again, or is it still just a big mystery to everybody?
As I mentioned in my report, Katie and I are meeting every Wednesday morning. We're having a phone call every Wednesday morning, and we're just kind of abiding by the governor's safer at home orders, which the last round was May 15th. One thing that I did talk to the management team about today was that even if, let's say, May 18th is when we're going to bring staff back, that's probably not when the library will open. It's going to take us probably at least a couple weeks to get the building as well as the services in accordance with social distancing. And all of that's going to be based on recommendations largely through LA Public Health or LA County Public Health. I think Catherine Barger's office has done a good job of laying things out that way. But again, we're leaning on when governmental agencies tell us we should bring people back.
And if I can just jump in. So one thing that, Nikki and I are kind of watching every day is the numbers coming out. So LA County and obviously the state of California both are looking at how those trends are shaping. And so one of the metrics they're looking for is a 14-day period with a steady decline, which we have not really seen yet. If projections kind of go the way people think they will, then hopefully by, mid-May, end of May, we'll start to see that 14-day decline. Who knows, so we're standing by, and I think Nikki's exactly right. We're gonna make sure that whatever the recommendation is from state and county government, that we can still operate in a way that prioritizes the safety of the staff and the safety of patrons. Because I think the last thing we want to do is rush to open too soon and
Right.
put people in danger unnecessarily. So I know that we'll hear about this a little bit later when we talk about our emergency response plan and some of our phased response levels. But I think that, right now we're kind of in the same boat as everybody going, well, we'll wait and see what those numbers look like when we get to the first week of May.
Okay, great, thank you.
Nikki, may I just ask a question? Just for the sake of just, have you and the staff sort of looked at how you might position the library so that there is some distancing of patrons that might be coming in?
Oh, definitely. So the emergency action and safety team put together that crisis management plan that we're going to talk about. But a big part of that, and I think those first couple weeks that we have staff back in the building, is going to be removing some tables, removing some chairs, laying the computers out differently. We've even talked about not having people use computers in the building, but maybe outside, which would be an expansion of like possibly using laptops and mobile hotspots. We do have very, very good Wi-Fi, but we're looking at all of those things. We're also looking at the way, like you go to the grocery store, there's stickers on the floor in terms of where people stand. Are we gonna need to purchase sneeze guards and put those at the public service desk? So these are all things that we're talking about with the emergency action team. I just think until we get back and we hear the recommendations, we can't say definitively what that's going to look like. But we did purchase, Jonathan knows what it's called, but a really high, I don't know, what's the word? Like an industrial strength sanitizing and cleaner. Because like our first step when we get back in the building is going to be cleaning everything really, really well. And then continuing in terms of regular cleaning throughout the day. What does that look like? What's the schedule? What are we wiping down? We're also going to have to look at best practices in terms of sanitizing materials. As you know, we closed all the book drops, so people aren't returning. Once we get back in the building, we're going to want to set up like a measured response to bringing things back in, so that we're not like 100% inundated in one day, let's say, because the recommendations that are coming out of the American Library Association are that you quarantine those books or materials for probably 2 to 3 days. So we're going to have to use the community room and maybe more areas of the library and wait to then wipe those things down. So
Okay.
there's going to be a lot of things to consider before we bring patrons back in, for sure.
Very good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So this is Jason. So I think we should just be operating under the expectation that things will get extended. I know San Francisco and the Bay Area just extended through the end of May at this point. So it'd be good to hear, for at least for me, Nikki, if you know, thinking ahead, you know, I think just dittoing some of the comments at the beginning of the meeting about all of the amazing work that the staff has done just to try and move us into, you know, online content and all that. And I know there's been some mention of a couple of the upcoming, I guess, public meetings and stuff like that. Are there any other things in the works or that you would want to highlight at this point as far as what we can look forward to over the next month or so?
Sure. Well, one of the, sorry if my dog's bark. One of the big bummers for us was that we had Rita Dina planned for March, April, May. So like the children's staff were able to get a lot of online content in terms of crafts and programs and activities and story reading. Right now, the adult team is trying to work with the authors of Wild LA. One in particular, Charles Hood, I know he sent in a couple videos. So like we were gonna be doing an in-person nature journaling program. He put together some virtual content on that. So we're trying to expand, especially related to our first ever Rita Dina, that was gonna have all this cool programming at the library, as well as like hiking and walking the neighborhoods, doing something related to that. The other big thing that's being worked on right now is the summer reading program. Thankfully, we have a software platform called Beanstack, which is most of like your badge earning was gonna happen virtually anyway. Now we're having to figure out the best way to provide like performers and programming related to summer reading online. So I know the staff have been spending a lot of time on that. They're also looking at putting together some kind of like package that patrons will be able to come pick up as a family. That would include possibly a couple books that are related to the theme of the program. They're a paper form if they prefer that over going online, even though we are really pushing everybody virtually with summer reading. But that's something else that but as I mentioned, like if they're gonna come pick that up, also developing a safe way to make that happen in terms of like curbside pickup and involvement in reading. Because like you said, I think, it's probably going to get extended more. And even if, let's say, we can bring staff back as of May 18th, the library opening probably well into June or beyond. So, you know, it's figuring out ways to offer maybe curbside service or things like that. But that's what we're working on. My managers may be able to speak more to some of the other programming that's coming out. Oh,
You want to talk about Hoopla real quick and some of the additional digital resources that you guys have brought online?
oh, sure. So while I was in Glendale, we brought on a software platform called Hoopla. And, you know, we weren't really even talking about doing that because of like budgeting concerns. But since we've closed, we haven't really been able to purchase any physical materials. So we were able to funnel some of that money into getting this platform called Hoopla. And we felt that was important because we didn't have any other streaming movie platform. So, and it was pretty amazing because the turnaround with that vendor, it's called Midwest Tapes. We pretty much like initiated a conversation with them and had the platform live within about a week, which is just like unheard of and amazing. But in these times, they made those accommodations. What's great about it is it's a pay-per-use platform. So almost 700,000 items that are in there, and it's music, movies, graphic novels, ebooks, e-audiobooks, everyth's available all the time. So if it's in their catalog, you can always get it right away. There's no waiting lists or anything like that. And we launched it, I think about 2 weeks ago, and I was just looking at the console today, and we've had, I think, well over 200 checkouts already, which is really great for something that just kind of came out of the blue. The other thing that I was, letting you guys know about back in January and February was that we switched to Cloud Library, where we no longer have the Overdrive platform. In Cloud Library, just in the month of March, we had over 4,000 checkouts. And just to put that in context, we had Stella pull the numbers in Overdrive, and last year we averaged about 850 checkouts a month. So in Cloud Library, and again, that's not spending any more money. You're buying the same amount of digital content. We have that much more access because of that consortium we joined. So I'm really excited about both those things. And it really kind of opens the door to different resources and offerings that we have that maybe people weren't even aware of before. And that even as we open back up, they're going to be able to use both the physical as well as all of these virtual offerings. Because I think, in many of the discussions I've been in with other directors, there's probably going to be different expectations. There's going to be some people that maybe said, I like digital story time. I don't have to load my kids up in the car. I don't have diaper bags and strollers. And so there's going to be like this period of time where we're going to have to figure out how to maintain virtual offerings and programming, as well as opening the building up and offering it inside our walls as well.
Nikki, I've had some personal experience now with the Cloud Library, and it's great. I mean, you got so many titles, and I've already done 2 books on that. And you've got all the options about, night reading and different size on the font and everything. So I can tell you, and I'm sure some of the other trustees have too, it's really a good program.
Yeah, I've been maxing out my Cloud Library borrowing. It's pretty awesome. And I also want to note a couple of other things that I think are great. One thing that I know went out recently was a reminder to all of our patrons that as residents of LA County, they should also feel very free and encouraged to get a digital LA County library card if they don't already have one. Which, when we made that switch from Overdrive to Cloud Library, there was some issue because it doesn't work on a specific kind of Kindle, but LA County is still on Overdrive. So, and they have a much bigger offering than we did. So I think hopefully, that's something that people have taken advantage of. And certainly, your tax dollars go to pay LA County library bills just as much as they pay Altadena library bills. So hopefully people are getting the message on that. And now you can get an LA County card online that's good for 90 days. So you get immediate access to resources just like with us.
One other resource I've been really pushing in my presentations too is our database called BrainFuse. It has a function called Homework Help that offers online tutoring every day, 1 p.m. to 10 p.m. So for those of us parents that had to become our kids' algebra teachers overnight, and I'm having to relearn algebra. I was good at it at one time, I swear.
And Common Core algebra nonetheless.
Oh my gosh, yeah, Common Core out the window. But there's these tutors they're all the way from kindergarten through calculus in high school, so like they can help students live tutoring 1 to 10. So if you know of people that are struggling to help their kids with homework, definitely turn them on to that. And as I mentioned, and I'm preaching to the choir here, all you need is your Altadena library card number to access all these resources. And, we always were able to, because Christopher's so amazing, sign up for a library card through our website. A lot of other libraries had to get that working as soon as they closed. But just let people know, all they have to do is go on the website and they can sign up and get a card and have access to all of our digital offerings.
So what is the name of the tutoring?
It's called BrainFuse, one word.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think just to sort of circle back to something that you were saying a minute ago, Nikki, I mean, it's absolutely right that, at some point our building will reopen, but there is going to be a period of 12 to 18 months, if not longer than that, where there are plenty of people in our community who are still not going to be able to access our services in person, whether because they're in an at-risk group or they have, you know, other family members who are. And so it's really a challenge, right? And I think as we come into a budget year, we're going to be facing this. It's almost like trying to figure out how to provide two parallel sets of services for the foreseeable future. With probably less money. So, you know, I know that Nikki has just got her ear to the ground in the world of libraries, and every week when we talk, she has new and interesting ideas. And so I would just also encourage all of you guys, if you happen to hear about other things, I know Betsy, a couple of things have come up that we've talked about, but just as you hear about things, please, you know, send those along, because we're all trying to be as creative as we can. Knowing that we're going to have a long stretch of needing to think outside the box and sort of do public libraries in some really different and creative ways to try and keep everybody safe, but keep providing services.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
All right, any other questions specific to Nikki's director's report? Okay, perfect. So we'll move on to our communications update. And so I will hand it over to Chloe.
Hi. Sorry, I didn't realize I was making an update, but I can just speak a little bit more to what Nikki talked about. I'm going to keep it brief. So we started the Altadena Connections project just a couple days after we closed, as Nikki shared. And at the start, I think it was a really helpful thing to have, especially in the midst of the more urgent closures of everything happening around town, as we all were adjusting to the health crisis. So we were doing them much more frequently at first, and I've pulled back a little bit. We're doing now closer to once a week, just because after about a week or so, our open rates were dropping by almost half of what they were when we first started. So we're going to continue doing that. And as I get things coming in, those are included. And I've been having to pull a lot of the information myself out just from the county resources that we have, so that, because I think a lot of people are probably not signed up for like LA County emails because they come hourly. So I imagine not everyone is signed up for those. So I've been trying to pull through those and make sure that we're getting out relevant and new information. I think that's been the key, is wanting to make sure it's new and that it's stuff that is going to be really helpful for people. So that's been a focus while we're closed. It's also been, Nikki said a lot of this already, but just an opportunity for us to show off a lot of our digital services. So I've been trying to make the website more flashy on the homepage so that people are really seeing the things available to them digitally. So at www.altadenalibrary.org/safer-at-home, you can see a whole list of all of our digital resources, and staff continue to share with me external resources that they've looked through that we post on there as well, like the Google Arts and Culture features of being able to tour hundreds of museums around the world, stuff like that, that our staff continues to sort of compile for the public. We are also, I know, again, I don't want to be repetitive, but Nikki already said we've been posting a lot on YouTube and just trying to, I think, optimize this time so that people are aware of all that we offer while we're closed. And I think we have seen an increase in just normal circulation in Cloud Library than we were ever getting before in Overdrive every month. So I think it's showing people are starting to really discover that those are options for them. And we'll just continue putting out the Altadena Connections, and I'm planning in the next week to sort of follow up, now that it's been a few weeks, with the people that we first reached out to ensure that they're still finding it valuable, and maybe even getting some feedback from them on if there's a way that we could better share with them directly and the different community stakeholders to make sure as many people are getting crucial information as possible. That's all I've really got right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chloe.
Betsy.
Can I ask you a question? Chloe, what time, you mentioned in your report that you do a just show up club on
Yeah.
Wednesdays. What time? I'd like to come. I want to show up. When is it and where do I
It's
go?
at 4 o'clock on Wednesdays, and it's a small group so far, but it's been really nice just to connect with people. And the last Wednesday we had a meeting. We had, I want to say it was like 24 books recommendations to add to our reading list. So
Wow.
it was a great chance to sort of hear what people are reading. And if there were books in there that were not in Cloud Library, I think 99% of them were, but if they're not, it's a nice chance to share with our other staff that does ordering, so to ensure that they could order those in case that was something that the group was interested in. But I know normally we have regular book clubs that meet when we're open, that this was, instead of having a bunch of different book clubs, it's just an opportunity that's a little less formal to talk about what you're reading, what you're watching, and sort of connect with some familiar faces if you need some face time with people.
Totally get that. I have brunch at school and I'm doing brunch online with my kids at like from 9:45 to 10 o'clock. I just show up in a chat room with sixth graders and we play games. I mean, I think for you guys, probably one of the hardest things is, I presume, you miss your patrons. I mean, you know,
That's true.
you have a lot of relationships with, and now I think it's so cool that we now call them our neighbors. You know, you might see them out walking their dog, but I know you miss seeing them in the library. So I think it's a great idea, and I'm sure they really appreciate it too.
Thank you. I think it's a nice intentional time for people, even just to have human to human connection. As someone who lives alone with a cat, it's nice to see faces outside of my little furry friend's face.
Yeah, and Chloe, this is Terry, and I was thinking about what Katie said about passing on whatever little tips. And I'm probably 2 steps behind on this one, but the New York Times website is free right now to everybody. So you can just sign right in. And they've got some pretty good reporting going on about everything around the world. So just a little tip if you want to do something with that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's great. And I think we have Stella on the call too, who can, it would be more her department, I think, that would handle the type of digital offering. So she might be able to speak to that, or if we already offer something like that.
Hi, yes, we are looking into that. We're also looking into making sure that the other print papers that we get in, that we currently have, that we are trying to make sure that we will have a web-based version, not just for this closure, but also considering when we do reopen to the public, the fact that we might not be able to have multiple hands on a newspaper. So we're trying to address that issue. So we're working on that this week, and I'm going to be working with Carlene and Vicky on trying to order some of those electronic versions. We do have one database that does provide newspapers. However, it doesn't hit, you know, the LA Times, the New York Times, some of those bigger papers that we have.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions for Chloe or comments? Well, I'll just say that I know that all the staff have been working super hard, and none more so probably than Chloe, who has been really figuring out how to do, I would say, probably 18 months worth of infrastructure in about 6 weeks. So a big thank you to Chloe, to Christopher, to the entire team that's been figuring out how to solve all of these problems. These are, I mean, we have a team that's solving problems that have been Altadena issues for decades. And, you know, in the matter of a couple of weeks, they've come up with solutions. And obviously those will evolve over time, but certainly I think getting people information is a huge priority. And I also just wanted to thank Chloe and the rest of the staff who went the extra mile to help the town council with their virtual meeting this past Tuesday, I think. You know, one of the things we've prioritized in our strategic planning work is partnering, and I think it was a really nice way to make that a tangible reality, to show up and provide some of that infrastructure to allow them to meet, to allow that to be a public meeting. And I'm excited for us to be able to continue to be that partner and that good neighbor as we go forward. So thank you so much to Chloe and to everybody else who's making it happen. Thank you. Okay, so we will move on to our financial reports. This is on page 42 of your packet, so I will hand it over to Nicole.
Thank you, Katie. So if we look at page 42, these are actually a summary of the financials for January. Since we missed last month, I'm actually 4 months behind now. So if we just go down real quick, it's going to show that year-to-date expenditures are exceeding year-to-date revenues, showing a net income of negative 200,000. And that's going to be the trend until, like Paul mentioned earlier, we do get our property tax installments. That's the only time we generally show a positive net income. Let's see, and then the audit, we finally got that taken care of. I'm so glad. Some passports revenue and some credit card rebates for the month of January. And then under expenditure highlights, we did spend a little money on our HVAC system and to have some windows replaced at our main location. So does anybody have any questions about the financial reports for January before I move on to February?
Well, I did have a question. Chloe, this is Gwen. And I was just wondering on page number 47, I believe you put total expenses there and net ordinary income and showing it as a negative figure. And I guess maybe we've been doing this for a while, but why don't we just put in there the total income, which was 50,000 plus some, and the ordinary income, and show the negative negative balance as you have it right there. But have we been doing this all along like this, showing it as a negative?
Yes, yes. So most of my reports always show the negative net income. It's really only 2 reports out of the year that show the positive net income when we receive the property tax statements. And the report is generated this way because that's the way that QuickBooks generates it. So it lays it out like that. And
oh, really?
It does, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so if there are no other questions for January, I'll go ahead and move on to February. All right, so now I'm on page 56. And so again, the year-to-date expenditures are going to exceed the revenues. And that will be the case. We might get a boost in May, like Paul mentioned. Otherwise, we do tend to run at a deficit until we get that first big payment in December. Some good passport revenue there for February. And then we also did receive some payments from our support organizations in February. We did get a donation from the foundation to help with children's programming. And we also got the $1,500 from the Friends for the Poetry and Cookies event. And then under expenditure highlights, we have Christopher was able to purchase a new PA system for the main library. And we also spent some money at IKEA for new office furniture. Any questions on the February financials?
Oh, go ahead, Betsy, please.
It just occurred to me that I hadn't really thought about passport services until I saw this financial report. And I just wonder, is the passport services staff able to do anything virtually during this time? Or are they just pretty much not able to do any part of their job?
Unfortunately, not passports work. They are doing other tasks, other library related work, but no, unfortunately.
But so nothing that would bring in passport income, in other words. So we're going to be short on that for a while. Okay, thanks.
The one positive with that though, Betsy, this is Nikki, is that they extended the real ID deadline from what I understand, and that's really boosting passport revenue. So I'm hoping that, once we open up and we're able to offer those appointments again, that revenue should be higher than normal again.
Nicole, this is Jason. I just have a question on the financial side of things. Are we doing anything to track expenses, whether staff time or otherwise, specific to the COVID-19 response? Because I know there's going to be potential for applying for federal reimbursement for a lot of that.
Yes, we absolutely are tracking it. I'm tracking both payroll and any expenses. It's mostly Jonathan doing the buying. I think Nikki mentioned he had purchased that industrial antibacterial cleaner. So we're definitely tracking it. And I think if I'm got the right email, Nikki had signed us up through FEMA's website to be able to apply for those grants. So we're working on that too.
Good.
Nicole, one quick question, and this is in regard to February on page 56. You note 10,000 and change donation from the foundation. If I recall correctly, and it's been a couple months, so I'm totally prepared to be wrong on this, there were two like $10,000 donations from the foundation, is that right? And one of them was Rita Dina. Is this the other one, or is this part of the Rita Dina $10,000 gift?
I would have to double check on that. I want to say this wasn't for Rita Dina. It's a little complicated with the way that their calendar works because they're on the year calendar, not the fiscal calendar. So this 10,000 was their January donation, you know, for their calendar year.
Got it.
So, well, this funding was denoted to help pay for census outreach. So it's basically staff time.
Okay, got it.
And then the other half was a donation that was made to go towards some type of children's services or renovation. And we've earmarked it to renovate and upgrade the teen space at Maine.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you. It was listed a little bit differently here, and so I was trying to make sure I had all the $10,000 correctly allocated in my brain. So that's perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Okay, any other questions for Nicole? All right, Nicole, thank you so much. And we will, presuming that everybody's good, forge bravely ahead. Does anybody need a quick recess? Are we all in good shape? Awesome. All right, here we go. So we'll move into our committee reports. We'll start with the budget committee. Terry, would you like to do a quick report on that front? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, had a barking dog here, so I went on mute. Did you talk about the facilities report, Katie?
I have budget listed first, but.
Oh, budget. You know, we had a call, as you know, about a week or so ago, and I thought Nikki did a pretty good job of going over what the takeaways were from that particular meeting. That wasn't really a formal budget committee meeting, but we did talk about budget items, and among them, of course, was the idea that we would be looking at an outside funding source to get money that we might need for the facilities updates that we want to do. So we talked to a couple of people. One was Mike Williams, I think his last name was, and Shannon. And they both got on the line to let us know, kind of gave us the ABCs of getting a bond together for the construction that we want to do if we decided to go for a multi-million-dollar sum of money to make this happen. So they gave us a pretty good overview. One thing that had me a little turned around about this was that I got the impression from them that getting a bond and getting on the ballot were, you know, hand in hand. They were synonymous basically, and that we had to get a bond basically in order to proceed with trying to get any sort of money into the coffers. But after reading again some of the guidance from the state of California, we could make a move on our own, but any loan, let's say, that we decided to do would have to be, from what I'm reading, would have to be equivalent to 1 year's expenses for us, 1 year revenue, I should say. So we got a little closer to understanding how we might get money, and we got a little closer to understanding how we might have to get that on the ballot and so on. But there's still a lot of information that needs to be shared. And I think we plan to do that when we have the budget committee meeting. And then there's also a facilities committee meeting that's been scheduled for the next couple of days, in which we'll talk about that as well. So a little bit more clarity on what would it involve going forward. And It still seems a little out of reach, to tell you the truth, because if we were to go for a bond approval to the voters, it would really be the district of Altadena committing to a lot in terms of money over the next several years. So a lot of conversations yet to have about that. So I hope that covers it. Do you have anything to add, Katie? You were on that call.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Obviously we'll get into this more in depth at our upcoming budget committee meeting, which is on May 5th, I believe, from 2 to 4 p.m.
Yeah, it's May the 5th.
May the 5th, yeah. So obviously that'll be a public meeting, so anybody's welcome to join. Yeah, I mean, there are a ton of unanswered questions on the budget front, right? Not only in terms of our capital expenditures and how we're gonna finance the work that is gonna need to be done at Maine and at the branch library, what those final numbers are gonna look like. I know the facilities committee is in process trying to figure some of those out, and where we find funding to do that. But also, quite honestly, what our revenue stream is going to look like for this coming year. We don't know. We won't know what those collection rates look like from LA County for a little bit yet. And we won't know what impact that will have on how we handle our budget. Obviously, there will be some reduction. I think it's very safe to say across the board. How much that will be, we don't know. And so I think we're kind of very much in a wait and see sort of place, and making as many plans as we can and getting all the information we can so that we're in a position to make some good decisions as soon as we've got the data. Any questions or discussion on budget committee stuff before we move on to facilities, which I know kind of go hand in hand anyway? No? Okay, perfect. Then Jason, I'll turn it over to you for the facilities report, which appears in your package on page, 70.
Thank you. And I'm just going to touch on some of the highlights, and thanks to Terry and the budget committee for supporting the work of the facilities committee. I guess the big point is, we put a lot of time and effort into really hearing from the community and really kind of creating our dream list if money wasn't an option, and, had to deal with a lot of sticker shock when that top line number came in at around $20 million. But we had several committee meetings after that, a lot of extra work put in by ARG to kind of work with us. It included, again, a lot of stuff that was wish list. So, I think 3 million of that alone was if we were to purchase our own solar panels, which is probably not even the most cost-effective way to handle that. So after initial round of back and forth, we were able to cut that in half to about 10 million. And continue to have some committee meetings, asked ARG to kind of play around with some of the priorities and different stuff. And like Terry mentioned, we're having another committee meeting on Wednesday to dive into some of the final numbers. But in the meantime, I want to thank Nikki and Jonathan, because they've been putting a lot of work into kind of pulling pieces of things that have come out of that report that we can look at budgeting for and improving upon as we move forward. So I think the two big things that we're looking at that we're hopeful we will be able to budget for next year is, one, redoing the ramp on the north side of the main branch coming off of Mariposa to make that walkway wheelchair accessible, and up to current ADA and accessibility standards. The second one is folks will remember that the plans for Bob Lucas called for taking some of that space and turning it into an outdoor reading court. And then obviously a major priority is just updating the entrance and some beautification ideas for the front of the library so it's more noticeable, so people realize it's there. So those are the kind of things that we're hoping to work on regardless of where we end up at with the larger project itself. So those are kind of the highlights and the updates. I don't know if folks have any questions, Terry, or I could try answering.
I just had a comment, Jason, and that is sort of an ancillary thing, but we did get the word that the building qualifies now for sure as a historic building, and that it could be in at all three levels, the county, the state, and the National Register of Historic Places. And I don't think it's too early for us to be thinking about, you know, regardless of what happens with facilities or budget, for us as a group to start thinking about how we want to handle that. And one question, and this is kind of for you, Katie, because you'll remember, I think, just with your interactions with public, about whether or not we've discussed that whole item sufficiently with all the you know, the voters in the community, and whether or not we need to think about you know, kind of pitching that idea a little bit more to the public. I don't know what an agenda item would look like if we tried to get that on the next meeting, but I do think talking about that and trying to make a decision is probably something that we can do, you know, without budget committee considerations or without facility committee considerations, because I don't think it's going to cost that much to do. So just a little something, a little milestone that's out there for us to handle.
Yeah, no, certainly that's right. And if I'm recalling correctly, if I remember correctly, the fiscal impact on the whole historic designation process, it was like 10, 12 grand, something like that for the whole deal. Did we allocate that already and say we're doing it, or did we just say let's investigate if we qualify or not? I seem to recall that we didn't spend the money. We just said let's find out if we're eligible. Is that right? Am I remembering that correctly?
Well, I'll jump in, and Jason, you can too. My recollection is that they had advised us that if we took the initial steps, that we would be able to kind of grandfather in any elevator changes that we wanted to make under the historic building designation.
Right. But
they wouldn't pull the trigger until after we made a decision about what we wanted to do. The pricing that you quoted seems actually a little low to me, and I can't remember why, but I'll defer to Jason on his memory for this too.
I don't remember so much the pricing, but I don't know if we took a formal vote, but we did make a decision on the record that we were going to pursue this, right. But that our hope was that we could do this work under the assumption that it gets approved and hold off until next fiscal year to actually budget the funds to pay for the actual study and all the formalities of it.
That's right. That was my question and I thank you. That's very helpful. Yeah, I agree with that. I think maybe let's see what comes out of the facilities in the budget committee meeting in the next week or two, and then figure out how to craft that agenda item appropriately. But I think that that's right, that there does seem like a short term, whether it's a discussion item or an action item, that we can move on. If nothing else, certainly it has the making of a good communication strategy, right? That even though our buildings are closed, we're working on this effort to, you know, save and upgrade and prioritize our buildings in this way. So I think that's exactly right, and we can come back to that in May, certainly. So thank you. I'll make sure that shows up on the agenda. What time is the facilities committee meeting on Wednesday?
I believe it's at 3 o'clock on Wednesday.
If you guys don't mind, I might sit in.
Sure. Yeah.
Are we allowed to have 3 of you in a
meeting? Is from 2 to 4?
It's called the church mouse rule. So as long as any board member can attend, like literally not allowed to say anything. So I myself and wave permanently. Yeah, because I'm a member of the public or whatever, like you can show up, you just can't deliberate. You can't participate in any meaningful way. But I just love to hear what, you know, kind of the state of the conversation is.
Is that an actual rule, the church mouse rule? Oh, wow.
So I will share that Zoom meeting with the other board members too, just in case they want to jump on.
Perfect, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay, great. Anything else on facilities?
I just want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly. There is a budget meeting on the 5th from 2 to 4. Correct. And then a facilities meeting, or is this going to be a part of the budget?
The facilities meeting is this Wednesday, the 29th, correct?
Okay, okay, the 29th, okay, all right.
Good. Okay. All right, perfect. We will move on then to the CVRA committee. So,
Katie, real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you want Chloe locked down screen share, but she can share her screen? Do you guys want the package up there so you can, as we go through these things, you guys can be looking at it on the screen or no?
I've got it up on my screen.
I'm good.
You guys want it?
Chloe, the other option is if somebody needs to screen share, she can set them as a co-host and that'll allow them to do it as well.
Well, I'm just saying, like, as we go through the rest of the package, do you guys want it on the screen or no?
I'm okay personally.
I've got a hard copy, so I'm
I
good.
have a hard copy,
Let's just keep referencing page numbers though. So if anybody is
right.
home or
Okay.
checking out later,
Just thought I would check.
yeah, thank you. These will correspond to the page numbers in your packet. So the CVRA committee report appears on page 71. That's followed by the proposal from Doug Johnson from NDC, the demographer that we've been in conversation with. And I'm not going to belabor this too much because it's pretty much all in the report. But basically, the long and the short of it is, you know, Betsy and Nikki and I got together with Doug and talked with him a little bit about the process for our redistricting and what that will look like. All of that was based on the assumption that census data would be forthcoming in March of 2021. And it looks like now that that may not be the case. Congress is being asked to consider an extension for census data till June. The U.S. Census Bureau is basically saying, like, listen, we can't do all the stuff we need to do. We can't hire workers. We can't go to door. It's going to take us longer to finish conducting the census. So, you know, that will certainly impact us. How it will impact us, I don't know. What Doug said, and I think that this is probably the best takeaway that we have right now, is because we're an independent special district, basically as soon as that data is available, we can go. And so we'll just sort of wait and see what the timeline is. If you guys recall, under the terms of some of these lawsuits that are being filed, I mean, you can do this whole process in 45 days and 90 days. And, you know, obviously the more time we have, the better. So I think one thing we can discuss with him as we get closer into, you know, December of 2020 and January of 21 is what pieces of this, what community outreach we can do ahead of time before we get the census data to draw these maps, what is going to be reliant on that data coming out, and just how that's going to impact the sequence of elections. The thing to basically be aware of is that the elections that are up in, the seats that are up in 2020 will still be elected at large. If, and this was what Doug wanted me to mention to you guys, if one of your seats that's up in 2020, so that's Betsy, Gwen, and Terry, if you are for sure not gonna run again, it would be helpful for us to know that before we get to the redistricting process. Like, you know, as soon as you have a determination on that, because then we can think about how to draw that district in a way that doesn't like impact you. If you're not sure, or if you're up in the air, don't worry about it, right? It's all totally fine. You have all the time in the world to decide, just like anybody who would normally file, you know, until August. But if you know for sure one way or the other, that could be useful for us to know. Those 3 seats will continue to be elected at large. If you are elected to one of those seats and your term from 2020 to 2024, if at some point in there you resign, that appointment to replace you will be an at-large appointment. So basically the appointment follows the election. Presuming that we get the census data in time to handle the redistricting process in 2021, then the other 2 seats, so mine and Jason's, will be impacted, and those will be by district elections. And so whether those districts will correspond to where we live or not, who could say, right? Like, that's not, we don't have any control over that. That'll just be what it is. But we will handle it. And so those 2 districts will be drawn and elected in 22, and then the following cycle in 24, the remaining 3 districts will be elected. So basically it takes a total of 4 years to fully transition. I hope that makes sense.
So Katie, I have a question. So, and hopefully we'll be seeing all of our board members again after this November. But so the question is, so we only will have 2 seats being voted within districts in 2022. But what happens if one or more of our fellow board members that get voted into a 4-year term this year end up falling within one of those 2 districts that are going to be voted on?
Doesn't matter, right? So let's say, for example, right, let's say Betsy lives in one of the districts that's going to be up for election in 2020. Doesn't make any difference. She's elected at large. If she resigns before her term finishes, that seat is appointed at large. It's like that districting like never happened.
Got it. Okay.
So it just applies to the sequence of elections. It's a weird way of doing it, but I guess it's sort of the least unfair way of kind of handling it in a staggered.
Okay.
Yeah. So just, food for thought, just sort of think about it. What we'll try to do, and we'll gauge this based on kind of how busy our agendas look in the next couple months, is we'll have Doug at some point come and do a presentation to the board and just talk through all this so that we can ask him some questions and, sort of flesh this out a little bit more fully. I think it makes sense to wait a little bit till we see what happens with some of this timing on the census. There are going to be a lot of other jurisdictions that are going through redistricting, so it's going to impact all of our friends at Pasadena Unified, at Board of Supervisors, like everybody's going to be impacted by this redistricting process. And this is also something that, once we've undertaken a districting process, we will need to, every 10 years when there's new census data, just tweak those districts. And he didn't think, and I think this is probably correct, that that would be a huge undertaking or tremendously expensive or difficult, but it is something that we'll need to factor into our budget, into our planning long-term as an ongoing recurring expense.
I have a couple of questions, Katie.
Yeah.
And one is that it sounds like you're keeping an eye on this. Has the pace of lawsuits against non-compliant districts, has that abated at all, or is it still ramping up? The
courts are largely closed, so that's pretty quiet right now. What I had heard was that prior to everything closing down, there were certainly still districts that were getting sued. And whatever law firm it was sort of working through their catalog. Doug was under the same impression that we are, and that BB&K has agreed with us on, that like between our resolution of intention and our sort of plan to undertake this process, that even if we were to be sued, there's no way we could do this faster, right? Like it would be less fair, it would be less representative for us to use 2010 census data to draw districts than to wait until the spring of 21. So he agreed that we were at no risk, in terms of liability. But it seems like this is an ongoing thing that's going to continue. Whether that picks up again post shutdown, we'll see. But I would anticipate that it does.
Okay. And then the second question is just procedural, I guess, and that is that we'll have districts that we draw, 5 of them for every seat that we have. And it sounds like there could be a lot of variability in that if it's based on population. You know what I'm saying? So you could have a district that fans out more to the east or the west or whatever, wherever people are. So is there a series of district patterns that they present? That well, that one looks good. Is that how it kind of works?
Kind of, yeah. So what happens is there are basically a series of maps. So once the census data is available, the demographer, so basically Doug and his team, draw a series of maps based on their best guess of things like communities of interest, right? So if there's like a neighborhood or a linguistic group or something, you want to try to keep communities coherent, right? Rather than like splitting them down the middle or, gerrymandering weird things. So you draw sort of the best version you can. And then we have a series of public meetings where we present those maps and we ask people to give us feedback and to give us, their suggestions on how we could draw them more fairly. The legal requirement is that all the districts must be the same in terms of population, but the way that we draw them, you know, is up to us functionally, and the goal is to draw them in as fair and representative a way as possible. So there's a series of sort of public meetings and forums where we go back and forth, and people can, you know, draw their own maps and suggest things. And so we're looking at various different software solutions and platforms for people to do that, to make it accessible and easy as possible. What Doug pointed out is that, like, all the software in the world about district drawing really only gets upgraded every 10 years. When there's demand for it. So he said, you know, anticipate some really cool open source stuff coming out in the next 6 to 10 months. And so hopefully we can take advantage of that to get people to, you know, in the same way that we have with strategic planning with facilities, get people's feedback on what they feel like is fair and representative.
Okay, great, thank you.
With the lawsuit thing is like that series of when those public meetings happen is just super compressed. Right. So the advantage to doing it this way is we have more time for people to engage in the process and give us their thoughts.
Great.
I'm sorry, Betsy, did you want to add anything? Because I know that.
No, I felt like you covered it. Thanks.
Other questions or any other discussion on redistricting or CVRA stuff? Okay. Perfect. Then our last committee report will be the District Director Evaluation Committee. Betsy, is there anything that you'd like to update us on for that one?
I saw that updated goals is on the agenda, and Nikki, I wasn't sure if you were going to give us an update there. So
yeah, you know what you wrote. On screen. You wrote a report for the March 2020 that included the updated goals, but it didn't make it into this packet. So I just forwarded that to Chloe. Chloe, are you able to put that attachment up?
I'm gonna put it in the chat right now, if that's okay. Instead of screen sharing, I'll just copy paste that in the chat.
Okay. So if you guys want, I will just really summarize what those updated 6-month goals were. Does that sound good?
That's great.
Okay, so, and these were the goals that we agreed upon at my 3-month evaluation, which were: number 1, update or draft at least 1 policy per month to present to the board for. Number 2, develop and implement a robust outreach effort to support census collection. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. Number 3, work with ARG to finalize the design documents and cost estimation and determine next course of action. Number 4, work with BB&K and Nicole Fabry to complete an updated employee handbook. 5, work with Koff and Associates to work towards completion of the classification and compensation study. Number 6, facilitate our first Read Adina, 1 study, 1 book effort, including programs and activities. Number 7, analyze and make suggestions about the organizational structure of ALD. Number 8, develop a webpage on the 2020 board election, including a plan to hold workshops on how to run and all that it entails for the community. Number 9, work with the trustees to facilitate introductions to community stakeholders. And number 10, perform ongoing analysis of revenue streams, assess and commend future development opportunities. So those were what we agreed upon. As you can tell, some of them are probably more doable when I'm back in the building, or some of the things that we're limited to with remote access. But overall, I think we're making good progress. Interestingly, my 6 months, have been here 6 months next week, which is crazy, but.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, May 4th, I believe, is 6 months already. So
Wow.
that's the update on that.
Time is moving. Oh my goodness.
So I think one thing that we will need to do, and maybe this is a good time to chat about it a little bit, is we will need to put a closed session agenda item on for May, so that 5 of us and Nikki can sit down and talk through those goals in exactly the same way basically that we did for the 3-month. So we can, I think we can probably reuse the same system, right, that we did last time. That seemed to work pretty well.
Sure.
So we'll circulate Betsy, how did we do it? We circulated it. Okay, sorry.
So,
Filled it out and then I sent it to Betsy, I think, right?
yeah, and then we engaged Roger Crawford at BB&K to collect everybody's, so to remind everybody, the basic issue is we can't be discussing this outside of a meeting. So we can't be sharing our comments about, you know, whatever we wanted to discuss with Nikki until we're in the closed session itself. But we want to have thought about, you know, we all want to have had time to think about it and make our comments and have that all ready for the closed session. So, so I guess I'll maybe I can just remind myself and go back and be clear in an email to everybody, just sort of remind us how we did it the first time. And then if you all would just be prepared to get Nikki's filled out form that she's going to provide us with, you know, her report of what she's done for her first 6 months, or the second 3 months of her first 6 months. And whatever comments you want to make, you'll make in writing. And then once again, I'll set it up for you to send those to Roger. And then his office will compile them into one document and get it back to us so that we'll have a collated document ready to consider at the May meeting. Can I just say though that the one little tiny little glitch with the way that it worked last time, because Jason was traveling that month, his comments didn't quite make it into Nikki's folder yet. And I've been trying to get a hold of Roger and getting through to him through Ruben, and of course everybody has a lot of other things on their mind, and this is kind of a minor little thing to like check off that process is done. You know, that's basically the summary of how we did it the first time, and then I think how we can do it this time too.
That seems good. And I think that I think it's very reasonable to predict that our May meeting, which is May 25th, will be virtual again. I mean, go ahead.
Isn't that Memorial Day?
It is.
I apologize.
18, okay. I'm just gonna look at the calendar to see, because it's not in my own calendar, but I'm pretty sure we've thought about that at the beginning of the year.
And I just open it up and pick the 4th. But you're absolutely right. So May 18th, which means that we would need to have those comments turned around fairly quickly.
Oops, I'll work on a time frame and a timeline in the next few days.
Thank you so much. That's awesome. Okay, I think that seems great.
Can I jump in real quick? I think we covered this also on the board calendar, but for May, that means that any trustee reports as well, and I'll talk to staff reports, everything kind of gets bumped up a little bit. So Nikki will need those reports, and I will work with Nikki as well, as long as I'm here, to just kind of get everything going for that May board package.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we'll have kind of a weird thing where we had a really extended period, and now we're going to have kind of a compressed one, and then we'll be sort of back to normal. Okay, perfect. So that takes us through all of our committee reports. Any trustee reports that people would like to make individually? Betsy.
I just have one thing to report, which is that I wrote an op-ed piece a couple of weeks ago. I just had this idea that there are probably a lot of people out there that maybe don't know that even though our doors are closed, we're open. And of course, not just us, but all the library systems in this area. And so I wrote an op-ed piece just bragging about all the things that public libraries are doing even with their doors closed, which will be run in the Star News either one of the first 2 Sundays of May. So just watch for that. I'll send it around when it comes. I had originally written it kind of completely generically, and then they needed 50 more words. So I thought, okay, well, I'm bragging about Altadena then. So I added a little bit about what our incredible staff is doing. And I just feel like I want people to just to know that we're here. So that's coming up.
Good.
That's great. Congratulations on that, Bessie. Thanks.
That's great.
Other trustee reports?
No, but I just want to thank you guys for making me get on the computer and learning how to use Zoom. It's so cool. It's just wonderful. So I learned how to do this myself. So I'm really just thrilled.
You're rocking it. Totally.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, perfect.
If I had such a thing as a virtual gold star, I would give it to you.
Oh, I received it anyway. Thanks.
All right. Okay, then let's move into our new business. So this is item 8, our November 2020 election information and outreach. This is pages 92 and 93 of your board package. Nikki, do you want to say anything about this? Do you want me to talk about it?
I think it'd be best for Kylan.
Okay, perfect. Kylan.
Yes, give me 1 second. Okay, so I will say, I do want to say before we closed, I reached out to a couple of people at NBBA and the League of Women Voters. I met with Chloe and we talked about the website and having as much information as possible up there on the dates for, candidate filings and all of that, and the information for what resources LA has provided. And in that conversation, we talked about the what Katie and Nikki and I talked about in our meeting about possible programming to help people that may be interested in running for office. And so I did reach out to MBBA, League of Women Voters, and I did get some responses. They were very enthusiastic. Monica Hubbard reached back out to me, as well as Karen Gibson and Martha Zavala. Monica Hubbard also pointed us to the National Women's Political Caucus and mentioned a couple of people that she works with that might be interested as well. Let me see. So I just want to let you guys know about that. I did tell them, though, that, obviously that conversation was put on hold with everything that's been going on. And so, let me see. So yeah, the other thing, oh no, we're not there yet. We're not at the candidate statement, are we? No. Okay. So yeah, I don't know if you guys have any other questions about specific elections stuff. The county does have their handbooks up for both voters and candidates. And I think Chloe, maybe Chloe can speak to this, but I think we do have a page up on the website, or we have a draft. I'm not sure, Chloe, if you want to speak to that.
Just give 1 moment, she'll be right back.
Okay, so the candidate statement policies, we do this every year. The county requires us to state whether or not we pay for candidate statements, and we never have. It's in the board policies that we require any candidate running for office to pay for their own statements. So when we actually just filed the paperwork with the county, letting them know which board seats are going to be on the ballot, and they ask for a copy of this resolution to be included, and a map of our boundaries, which is still the same, but will be updated in years to come. And so, yeah, you guys we did this in 2018 as well. It's pretty straightforward. But I think what the plan is, if you guys approve the resolution, we will mail it or email it to you guys. And if you can, Katie and Jason will just sign it and email it back. And then I think Nikki signs off on it as well. And yeah, and then we'll get it to the county. So they know that that's coming, but they just need it on file for this upcoming election. Sorry, I was totally thrown off. I was talking about outreach and information because I was looking at an old agenda, so I apologize. But yeah, so the resolution, like I said, very straightforward. We just need to provide it to the county to let them know that the candidates will have to pay for their own candidate statements.
Hi, Kylan. This is Chloe. I'm so sorry I stepped away to the restroom. What? There was
No, it's totally fine. I was mixed up anyway. But if you want to talk about election outreach, you're welcome to. But it's okay.
I don't have a huge update right now. I know you and I had started working on a landing page that exists, and we will continue throwing information in there about. And then all that conversation was happening right as the closure happened. So maybe I can connect with Nikki this week and get more of our plan finalized, because I know you and I had started it, but it was just bad timing.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
This is Jason. Just one quick piece of feedback, just from my own personal experience, is I would, if it's about like sharing information about, what folks need to do and all of that, I would suggest relying more on the Fair Political Practices Committee, which is the state, than with the county. I'm still dealing with a bunch of stuff for my own personal election because I got either conflicting or wrong information from the county office. And then even within the FPPC itself, you can call and get different information from different people. So that would just be my own personal feedback, just based on my own experience in doing this for the first time.
Thank you. When Nikki and I meet, we'll be sure to look at that resource versus just the county stuff. It is kind of confusing from just my experience of looking at it as an outsider of the county election stuff. So we'll make sure we're pulling from all sources.
Perfect. Okay, then with that, I think our next action, and this is on page 93 of your board package, is for us to approve resolution number 2020-01. I'm not going to read it into the record, but I would just ask for a motion to approve the resolution as it appears in your package.
So moved.
Okay, and a second?
I second it.
Okay, perfect. Gwen, I got a second from you. So we'll take a roll call vote on that. Trustee Andrews?
Did I do that again? I'm so sorry. Yes, my vote is yes.
Okay, perfect. Trustee Capel?
Aye.
Trustee Khan?
Aye.
Trustee McMullins?
Aye.
And an aye vote for me, so that's unanimously approved. So we'll just get digital signatures on those and turn them back to you.
Okay.
Perfect. All right. Item 8B, review and approval of updated key policy. This is on page 94 of your package and following. Nikki, do you want to cover this briefly?
Sure. So, as I'm sure you all recall, we brought you our brand new key policy to review, and there were several changes that were offered by the board. So we were supposed to update and bring it back to you in March. Nicole and I, as one of the many webinars we have been attending lately, attended one on policy auditing. And one thing I do want to say is we're on the right track. They were talking about trying to bring at least 1 to 2 every month, making sure that you're constantly auditing and looking at those. And I give Cindy Cleary lots of kudos for doing that for us. But the one thing that they did point out in that webinar was that your policy really shouldn't be procedural. And I immediately thought of the key policy because it basically like covered how things are issued, the different types of keys, et cetera, et cetera. So we decided to go back, and her and I, with the help of Jonathan, basically cut it down so that it doesn't have all that procedural things. And the point being that if we decide that we don't want to have, let's say, key cards anymore, we shouldn't have to bring this to the board to update it. So as you can see, it went from being like a 4-page document down to less than 2. So it's really just saying we have this policy, we're going to make sure we have an inventory, the building facilities manager will be in charge of that, and that's it. At least we'll have this policy in place. So I'm just recommending that you guys approve this newly revised and much pared down version of the key policy.
Okay, any questions or comments? Betsy, please.
I thought I had mentioned this last time, and I don't know, sorry, I don't remember what you said, Nikki, but I did notice under the key signature form, you talk about employee. Are we covered as volunteers? Because we have key cards, and you guys should know that in your policy. So I don't know if you need to add trustee to that list of roles that are played, or if ours is included as volunteer.
But which?
On page 95, under key signature form.
But I think you need to be specific as to what trustees have a key. I don't have one.
Right. I mean, that should definitely be part of the inventory process. I'm going to lean on Nicole. I know she's still on here. Do you think that needs to be separated out, or do they fall under the category of volunteer?
They definitely do fall under the category of volunteer for things like workers' comp and liability issues. If we wanted to just be extra clear in the policy, we could say volunteers and trustees. But yeah, technically they're always volunteers.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, with that, I'm gonna ask for a motion to approve the key policy as it appears in the package.
For motion that we accept the key policy.
And I second.
Perfect. So motion from Gwen and a second from Carrie. We'll take a roll call vote on this one as well. Trustee Andrews.
Aye.
Trustee Capel. Okay. Can you re-vote, Jason, just because you were said aye?
Aye.
Trustee.
Aye.
Trustee McMullins.
Aye.
And aye for me as well. So that's a unanimous approval on that policy. Thank you. All right, perfect. We're blowing through this. Let's move on to item 8C. So this is, there's a memo about this that appears on page 97 of your package, and then the actual crisis and communication plan information was emailed out, I believe, today. So you guys will have that as an attachment in your email. So I will, Nikki, do you want to talk about this?
Sure. So the one thing I guess I'm going to lean on Kylan for right now is because it's not in the package, does this need to appear somehow on our meeting?
No, as long as it's up on the website with all our other board package materials, it's fine. It went out to staff and the board, and then I think Chloe posted it up on the website. So
yeah, I
posted
it last night or whenever you sent it.
Yeah, it's definitely under the board materials. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't have to like visibly show it during this meeting. Okay, so a little bit of background. When we started setting up the new teams, as we called them, the emergency action and safety team was working on updating our emergency manual. With the closure, that in a couple of the webinars that staff attended, it highlighted a need for emergency response and crisis management plan. So that's what the East team has been focused on since we closed. Like last week, they had 3 meetings. So they've really been trying to like develop a policy that we'll feel good about. I do think I shared with the board through my weekly updates that I send to staff and for talking to Katie, that we were trying to develop a leveled response that would cover all emergencies. And what we found from all of these meetings as a group and talking through some of these changes to it, that that's really not possible because each emergency has different nuances that you have to take into consideration in the leveled response. I think this pandemic's a perfect example of it because there's so many things that are related to public health, social distancing, and other things that you just aren't going to see in some of the other emergency responses. So if you want to take a look at the document, we built it off of some of the other ones that we saw, as well as a real focus on communication and actions by crisis phase. So we did, like, as you can see in the document, there's still some yellow highlighted areas that need updating. And then if you keep going through into page 3 of it, which is, oh, it's not part of the package, so it's not confusing. That's where you'll see that leveled response. At one point we got up to 7 levels, which I think was a bit too much and kind of confusing, to be honest. Mm-hmm. So we pared it down to 5. And I think our plan is to keep all leveled responses to 5, irregardless of what emergency it is. And so like the real big things are level 1, which is what we're in right now. We're closed. We don't have staff in the building and we're proceeding that way. Level 2 is where, like, what we're going to end up being in, where we bring staff back into the building and try to figure out a measured response in terms of returns, social distancing of staff, and what social distancing will look like when we open the building. And that could even include like limiting the number of people coming in per hour or per section of the library. And the interesting thing about that, and I'm veering off the path a little bit, but one of the things that people talk about when they're reopening, like some of the other library leaders I've been in touch with, is like a reduced schedule. You think, okay, well, we've been closed, we'll come back in increments. But the difficult thing about this social distancing is that you might almost have to be open more hours when you talk about like staggering staff, for example. And let's say the Altadena community has 500 people that need to visit us a day and we're only letting 25 people in per hour or something. I'm just throwing numbers about. That might mean we need to be open more, so it's really like looking at how we can best be responsive and make sure that we're being fair and equitable to everybody in the community that needs us. The hard part about these crises, like especially when I think back to the recession in the late 2000s, is when the going gets tough and our funding gets cut or things like this happen, that's when the community needs us the most. So we're gonna really have to figure out the best way in level 2, which is we're not open to the public, and then moving into level 3, which is more of that minimal service. And I think that's gonna be the trickiest level for us in terms of like figuring out how to open and do it in, like Katie said, the most secure and safe way to the staff as well as the patrons coming in. So again, what that looks like, I didn't want to put specifics in this because we don't know exactly. And I think, like I'd emphasized to the East team, it might start out as one thing in level 3 and then progress into something still within that same level. Like it might be that we open and we only let 25 people in at a time. And then before we even move into level 4, we're already up to 100 people out or an hour or something. So just as an example. Then, like I said, moving into level 4, that's where we're getting closer to things being normal. That's where I see us integrating some type of programming back into things, but probably in a limited capacity. Maybe it's really small programming efforts. I'm not sure. And then again, level 5 would be things are back to normal, which who knows what that is ever really going to look like moving forward.
That's true.
And then at the end of the document, there's other examples of other emergencies that once we get through this, I think this was the one that we felt was important to share with the board to prepare us for the reopening phase. Then we're going to continue adding to it. But again, we're very open to your feedback and suggestions and want to incorporate that into this before it becomes a finalized document. And it's getting really dark in my house. So I'm going to turn a light on. So please speak.
All right, so I'm going to open up the floor for questions or comments from the board at this point.
Well, I agree with that, the 5-level approach that you have. I think that's a good, solid way to go on this. Yeah, I mean, you really got to think about all the possibilities, things that can happen out there, which is amazing to me. So I wish I had some practical advice to give you about that, some experience, but I don't. But it sounds like having that as a platform of how you'll proceed is a good way to go.
Other questions or comments?
So I think maybe what we could say, because I'm sure there's still a lot more digesting of this document that the board can do. We didn't want to share it when it was, because like 2 weeks ago, it looked 100% different, to be quite honest. Give you guys some time if you have suggestions or feedback that you want to share, just to email those to me. Because again, we're going to continue working on this document. And I'll just keep the board updated on it if that sounds good. This was an informational item. I just wanted to make sure that we provided you guys some kind of draft to look at, as well as an opportunity to let us, provide your feedback to us.
One thing that does come to mind, Nikki, is that a while back I had the thought that what kind of coordination would occur between us and sheriff and fire and everything else in the event of something really big. And I remember actually going to the fire station one day. I was on a bike ride and asking them that question. And I said, what's your emergency plan for the big earthquake or the big, event that has everybody out in the street? And they said, it was pretty much gather at Farnsworth Park and we'll get to stage 2. And I always wondered about ways in which we could coordinate our response with other agencies. And I don't know if this is an opportunity for that or not, but just something to consider, I think.
Yeah, that's good feedback. It should move into the communication for sure. Okay.
I think, one thing that I think, Nikki, you and I talked a little bit about is, I think the leveled response thing makes a ton of sense. And I think that, having these different categories makes sense as well, because obviously pandemic response, earthquake response, wildfire response, other kind of, emergency responses, all are going to be different. But I do think it would be helpful to have a common set of categories for each kind of plan. And my kind of basic list is like operations, communications and outreach, public health, governance, and that would include board stuff as well as interagency cooperation or communication with state, local, and potentially federal organizations. And then, public services. And there are probably other categories as well, but I think having a consistent set of categories would be very helpful, because then it's like, okay, obviously in a pandemic, our public health response thing is dialed way up, but like our infrastructure response, all of our infrastructure is basically okay, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Having some kind of consistent set of categories, even though they will be at different levels in different emergencies, I think might be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Because it's also very possible, and I, hate to be this guy, but it's very possible that we have multiple emergencies at once, right? God forbid we have a really bad wildfire season or a major earthquake in the middle of a pandemic. Like, what do? We have to combine those things. So then, it makes it easier to overlay some of those response categories.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
But I think this is a great start.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see this in place, and I think it's really good that we're thinking through this, and obviously an object lesson for us in having plans in place.
Well, and
your library has better planning than your fire department.
Yeah.
Well, and I do want to say that one of the things I've really emphasized when I've crashed these East meetings, when I've had time to jump in there, is I really didn't want this to read as procedural as much as policy, because once we agree to these levels, then it's like writing the processes for each level and what that looks like. So they're kind of already working on checklists that would work in coordination with this. And that's where, like, I didn't want it to get too specific. I'm like, with level 2, there at one point it was like outlining how we take holds back or returns. And I was like, no, at level 2, we're just developing a return process. And even within that level, it could be originally we're just taking them in a bin right outside the door, and then eventually we open the book drops. I don't know. But we don't want to get nailed down in these levels to these processes that could very much change, even within the same level. So
there are multiple flavors of pandemic, right? Like we happen to be in one right now that is a very particular flavor of communicable, but there are lots of different ones. And I think that's right. Having a general architecture that we can modify based on the conditions on the ground is really smart.
Yep. All right, perfect. So we'll keep working on it and we'll keep you guys updated.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to item 8D. Let me read this out because I'm going to get it wrong. It's another resolution, designation of applicant's agent for non-state agencies. Helen, do you want to talk about this one?
Yes, hi, and I will actually talk about the agenda item we're on this time. So this was part of, actually this memo came from BB&K. They were helping us with this whole FEMA, California emergency grants and things like that. They were guiding us through that process and telling us what we needed to do. It was a little confusing, but this resolution is a requirement of the Office of Emergency Services as part of that whole application process. There were a couple of other forms, and then Nikki did the registration for the FEMA grants. So this is just one piece of that, basically, and it's designating that Nikki or Nicole can be the applicants, I think, for these types of grants, or requesting assistance for the library, applying for and requesting assistance.
I just had a quick question, Kylan. There's a box checked that says, this is a universal resolution and is effective for all open and future disasters up to 3 years following the date of approval below. So presumably that means like it applies to all of our coronavirus response stuff, but if, like we were talking about just a minute ago, there should be a wildfire or there should be an earthquake or some other thing, we would be covered for that as well with FEMA. Is that correct?
Yeah, so this, I think what they said is this form has to be submitted every 3 years for non-state agencies. So we're just doing this now, and it does cover this or another emergency.
Got it. So this should be a thing that we have on file generally, right? Like regardless of whether there's an ongoing disaster or not, just in case something arises that we might need to deal with.
It sounds like it, but there were, and I'd have to pull up the email, there were very specific dates that like the Governor's Office of Emergency Services was, first they had like a very specific application date to get this application in, and then they said that this resolution could be sent in later, but then they ended up extending that date. I'm assuming they're just getting an overwhelming amount of response. So, I don't know if this is something that they, go by disaster, they put this out there and then tell people to apply, or, if we can have this on file just in case. It seemed like it was disaster specific, but I'm not really familiar with these, emergency services and FEMA and all of that.
Well, presumably we'll learn a lot about it, and we've got 3 years. If we need to do it again or not. So let me, if I could please get a motion to approve the resolution that appears on page 99 of your package, and a second, and then we can discuss or do anything else we need to do at that point.
So move. I second it.
Okay, so a motion from Betsy, seconded by Gwen. And so at this point, any questions or comments or amendments or anything that anybody wants to talk about on this front? Okay, hearing none, we'll proceed to a vote. So by roll call, Trustee Andrews.
Aye.
Trustee Patel.
Aye.
Trustee Khan.
Aye.
Trustee McMullin.
Aye.
And an I vote from me. So that resolution is unanimously approved. And it looks like it doesn't need any signatures from us, right? Just a signature from you, Kylan, is that right?
Right, yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so that takes us through all of our new business. There is no correspondence in this packet. So we move now to item 10, proposed future agenda items. And I have on my list from today, obviously our closed session with Nikki at the beginning of May's meeting to handle her 6-month evaluation, and also either an information or an action item of some description regarding our building historical status designation for May as well. Is there anything else that we'd like to include on the May agenda at this time apart from regular business? Okay. All right, very good. Then I think that pretty much covers everything. Before we get a motion to adjourn, I'd just like to say again to all of you, it's really nice to see all your faces. I hope you guys are all well and your families are well and everybody's sort of holding up as well as you can. And to all the staff who are with us, thank you so much for everything you guys are doing. Thank you, Nikki, and just, you know, I miss all you guys. It's nice to see you.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very
All right. Well, with that, then, if I could get a motion to adjourn, please.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. Any objection? Hearing none, we are adjourned at 7:32 p.m. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Be safe.